Okay.
Welcome to Your Resume, or CV. How to get recruiters' attention with your come on out experience. With your host, Robert Vilkellis. If you are here, it's likely because you want to get recruiters' attention with your resume or CV. You're in the right place. So why is this presentation important? Well, I don't think it needs too much context, but I still think it's important that we consider the sort of circumstances we're faced with. First of all, we spend years learning how to write essays. We spend more time than I ever wanted to learn how to do algebra. And yet we spent 0 hours on learning how to apply for jobs. We were never prepared to do interviews. We were never prepared to write CVs and resumes. So whilst we've got a lot of skills that carry over from our time in schooling, we have to learn to specialize the way we write and the way we present ourselves to really land jobs. And you can spend hours writing an application, but what does it look like from the other side? If you're like me, you've spent way too many hours in a day applying to a handful of jobs. Each application can feel strenuous. The process of trying to bring everything together takes a long time. And we spend a lot of time thinking about one job sometimes, just thinking about how we're going to approach this person. What's it going to look like? How am I going to appear to them? So what does it look like on their side when they've got your application? Speaking as somebody who's handled some recruitment recently with regards to this summer's Come On Out program, it feels a lot like this. You feel buried. This is kind of the problem, I will say, with the job process. It's not fun for anybody. It's not fun for you to apply because you spend lots of time and you get no feedback. It's not fun to recruit because you spend lots of hours needing to figure out who makes the cut and who doesn't. And very often, you end up looking at a lot of applications which are all really, really good, to the point where you really hope you get some bad ones so that your life is a bit easier. So the question then is, how do you stand out? How can you not just be a good application? How can you be a good application that stands out from the crowd? So with hundreds of applications, recruiters are actually skimming through what you write and through what you submitted to find things that disqualify you. Disqualification really comes down to, does this person have what I'm looking for? What flags do they have that show they are directly related to the job description that I've posted? What flags do they have that indicate that they have relevant experience in the industry? And what words are just entirely missing that I can just mentally deduct points for? A lot of applications just end up coming down to people looking for the key elements. And this is why when you are writing your CV, your resume, or an application, a lot of the things that make the biggest difference are the small things, the things that will grab skimming eyes. Very different from writing an essay where somebody is more likely to read it through and through. So how do you beat the pile and stand out with your experience? This presentation is going to start out by looking at some principles that can make your resume stronger and can make your come on out experience even stronger as well. So first, we're going to be reviewing some principles and looking at some general examples, and then we'll go more firmly into come on out. And in case you're not familiar with the word, I keep saying CV because in the UK, that's what we call a resume. The CV stands for curriculum vitae, a bit of pub quiz knowledge for you. And because, just in case you don't know me or whoever's watching this recording in the future, which I hope is going very well, might be wondering, I'm Robert. I've been with Coming Out since 2018. I love creating awesome learning experiences, preaching the joys of linguistics, and playing video games for longer than I should. Yesterday, that mostly entailed me watching Falcon and the Winter Soldier whilst playing RuneScape. Very good series. I'm very glad my mother got 1 month of Disney Plus. And I've got a lot of experience in journalism and in public speaking training, and essentially anything that involves communication. And that's why I love delivering these trainings, because it's all about refining how we communicate and how we become more effective at communicating the way we want to communicate. So what are the objectives of this presentation then? The first objective is to review principles, because writing a good resume doesn't have to be hard. You just need some starting points. And it's also to get ideas, to consider how you can put out in your resume and some examples for how that could look like. And how to get inspired, to consider how you can document your process in this job and any other jobs you've done and have it be strong and effective. So let's start out with an overview of resumes, looking at how do you write about your work experience. So let's look at the purpose of a resume or a CV. Should it list out your relevant experience? That is banal. I think we'd agree, yes, it should. But should it list out all of your experience? Not necessarily. And what you'll find is that over time, you will continue to gain lots and lots of great experience, but potentially in different areas, potentially in different sectors. Potentially some things you do now are more relevant than something you did a year ago that seemed really relevant then. Or potentially something you did 5 years ago is more relevant than a job you might be working part-time now. Understanding what experience is relevant in a CV is important. So it's often better to tailor your resume to your target employer, or at least your industry, broadly speaking. When I tend to go down into times where I'm looking to apply to lots of jobs, I end up having a consulting resume, I end up having a training resume, different resumes for different purposes. And oftentimes this just involves making small alterations to an existing template, which is your base template. But beyond this, there is a real purpose to your resume, though. And it's something that, when you think about it, makes a lot of sense, but we don't always think about it. And that is that the real purpose of your resume, it's just to get you to the interview. You need to get people's attention and have them say, I want to meet this person. And then when you're in the interview, you can impress them in other ways. Potentially, depending on the job, they might read your resume in advance and then barely skim it through on the day when they actually interview you, because they've already decided the resume impressed me once, that's all it needed to be. So it ends up being something you invest a lot of time into, but it's just the first step. And at the end of the day, your resume is just part of one stage, but it is an important one because it sets you up for everything else you go ahead to do. So what are 3 qualities of great resumes? The first one is that it is quantifying. And by that, I mean it lists explicit facts and figures about the work that you've done. If you were a journalist, how many articles did you write? If you created a YouTube channel, how many videos have you published? How many subscribers do you have? Numbers make you credible. They make work come alive, far more than just a broad description of work can do. The second is to be benefit focused. To put this in context, there is a notion of features versus benefits. A feature is something that a thing does, and a benefit is the utility it provides or the impact it has. So for example, let's think, this set of headphones, the features are it's black with a blue trim, it's wired, and it has volume control. That's cool, but what I really want to know as a consumer is how will it make my life better? This will make it so that my housemates don't knock on my door and tell me to turn my music down. And the fact that I can mute via this button here means that I have a lot more control over if I need to step away from the computer, and I don't want to make a big deal out of it. Benefits are all just based around what is the actual impact on my life. And if you actually start reading a lot of product descriptions and things, you'll often find that they don't start telling you about the specifications of a product or the design. They'll start telling you about how much better your life will be once you get this thing. And that's what your resume should do. It should tell you how you made the lives of the people in the company better or their customers. Because people want to know how you will fit into their equation of making their lives easier or making the lives of their customers better. Then the third quality is it has to be relevant. And oftentimes, relevancy actually comes down to criteria. The criteria is the job description, but more than just criteria, broadly speaking, we're talking about keywords. We're talking about if they say we want a minimum of 6 months to 1 year of shop floor experience, or if they say we want you to have spent at least 5 weeks teaching English in a foreign country. These sorts of things that often are bullet pointed are the things that when you are a recruiter, you sit down, you look at these descriptions, you identify the keywords in your head, and then you start reading through a resume or a cover letter looking explicitly for these things, which in essence actually makes your life a lot easier. Because when you know what the keywords are, they're given right to you. All you have to do is just pepper them through what you're doing, and you're guaranteed to get a much higher response rate than you would if you just submitted something generic. That being said, the way that I like to write my CV is that I like to have a lot of keywords in there by default. And that's what leads to a lot of revisions, just trying to pack as many concepts together as is humanly possible and still makes sense. So that if a computer reads it or a human reads it, the right words will hopefully catch their eye here and there. So these are the 3 elements: quantifying, benefit focused, and relevant. So let's put these elements into context. And because I set it out to absolute strangers anyway, let's use some examples from my actual resume, because I've invested enough hours in that to hopefully make them good. So this is what my resume looks like. Personally, I am very much not a fan of what the generic resume looks like, and I can guarantee you neither are most recruiters. If your resume has a header at the top where all your stuff is centered and the entire page is in Times New Roman, congratulations, your resume looks like everybody else's. Figure out something that can make your resume stand out just visually. That's not what this presentation is about, but it's helpful. I like to make mine stand out by using my personal color palette, which is these 2 shades of blue, and by trying to maximize readability by using different indents. If you want to read my resume further afterwards, just for inspiration, please go to robertvilkellis.com/my-portfolio, and you can download my resume there. If you have a job for me as well, that's also a bonus. But let's look at some examples of how you can write entries for job experience. So this was one of my first jobs. I got this at university. I was a journalist for UCL Communications for their student newsletter. And the description I write, which every description is limited to 2 lines of like 10-point font. It's incredibly small. I write, through authoring over 24 articles, which is quantifiable contribution to the writing, that create a sensory world for readers to explore. I regularly reported on goings-on around UCL to a diverse 43,000 plus student audience, which again quantifies the size of the readership. Working in partnership with UCL Library Services, I was instrumental in the creation of the Library of the Month series, which is potentially relevant creative experience, which shows that I can work in partnership with other people in the organization to create a beneficial result. So this is an example of one where I've used a lot of quantify, where I tried to quantify as much as I could, and I tried to frame the benefit of what I write, such as creating a sensory world for readers to explore. But I didn't bold that because it's a bit harder to quantify, for sure. It's very qualitative. Another one, this is a business that I founded with my mother 4 years ago. And what I write as my role as a co-founder and public speaking trainer is as a speaker coach, which is a relevant role if I'm applying for something regarding presenting or training. I help speakers become more impactful in presenting, which is a benefit, not a feature. So I help people become more impactful in presenting, not I hold one-to-one sessions with clients where I use exercises with them so they speak louder. Become more impactful in presenting their content with passion, conviction, and credibility. My expertise lies in producing frameworks that can explain complex ideas simply. Again, a benefit. As a pitching coach, I helped a tech startup secure £6,000 in a seed funding competition. Quantifiable result. I've just evidenced the fact that I can earn you money, maybe, if you're hiring me for that. But it still shows that I am efficient in my job. So you want to substantiate your claims with actual things that you've done and things that can then be raised in an interview. Because people will often double check if you make strong claims. But if you have strong claims that are true, go ahead and put them there. You've earned it. Then this is one's a bit more cheeky. I currently have a part-time job in retail. And if you've ever had a job in retail, there are some ways you can embellish it a lot. I'm not just a retail sales assistant, I'm a materials specialist. And by leveraging an expansive knowledge of artistic media, I quickly build relationships with customers. That's relevant customer-centric experience, I'll have you know, from hobbyists to professional painters, directly on the shop floor. And that makes it sound really good, like I'm really in the thick of it. By ascertaining their needs, and that's really beneficial, isn't it? And recommending project-tailored and budget-suited solutions, which is pretty beneficial, through a consultative sales process, which is a very specific set of words because a lot of jobs that I've looked at want experience in sales and consulting. So consultative sales process is a way for me to throw in keywords that the computer might pick up or somebody skimming through the literature would find. A lot of the things that as you develop your resume, you really want to maximize the impact of every entry you have. And the best way to maximize the impact is to get a feel for the sorts of things that you might be applying for and the sort of language they use. A lot of jobs, for some reason, want you to be proficient in Microsoft Office. So literally putting Microsoft Office somewhere in your resume is effective. If they want sales experience, make sure you explicitly mention the word sales. If you want to teach English as a foreign language for, I don't know, some company, consider putting that in there explicitly so that it is immediately detected. It's one of those things that almost sounds obvious, but when you get stuck into writing things, it can be very easy to lose sight of a lot of these details because a lot of it ends up finding out how can you structure what you write to actually capture as much information as possible. And actually, this wasn't one that I included as an example here, but just the second one on the right, learning designer, that one took me a few hours to write because I had to try and combine the age of students to give a sense of how old students are. I had to incorporate International Baccalaureate MYP students to give a sense of the programs that I worked with if I applied to an organization that deals in education. I had to put the name of the learning design platform that I used. I had to add the number of students. And this was all for me just to say, I helped write a course, I helped upload the content on a platform, and I managed users in this program for students that were 12 to 16 years old. I tried to pack as much information in there as possible so that if people are looking to hire me for learning design, they know my experience with a specific age range, with a specific curriculum, and a specific platform. So now let's move back to the presentation. So now that you've seen several general examples, let's take a look at Come On Out. So how can you write about your experience with us? Let's consider what you can touch upon. So I've already spoke about how you can use quantifiable things like numbers, how you can use things like the benefit you provide to a company, and how you can do the third thing, which I've forgotten. Relevant keywords, that was it. I spoke slowly, didn't speak slowly enough to remember. Let's build upon that. Specifically, when you're looking at Come On Out, you can review these three things. You can consider what your goals were for the internship, whether they were goals that you set for yourself or were set by the company. You can think about what was the output of what you created during this internship, whether it was your final presentation or some work you did for the curriculum or marketing or journalism, any of the other teams. And then what was the impact or the foreseeable impact of the work that you do? And what I would say is that if you want to write something and you want to make sure that it's not stretching the truth too much, but you want it to sound good, you can just ask us. And I will say why you should do this, because this was my thing from last year, where I definitely tried to hype up everything I wrote while still remaining true to what happened. Last year, when we did the virtual camp, I ended up being able to take the title of lead content architect, a title which I picked and asked Matt if it was okay that I put that on my resume, and he said yes. So you can ask things. We are very flexible. And what I ended up writing was, with high English competency being key. Let me just check. Yeah, okay. With high English competency being key, which is outlining the benefit of the program that Come On Out does for speaking about it to admission to Japan's top universities, I consulted the development of an innovative digital edtech ideathon, which is relevant industry keywords, particularly edtech, digital ideathon, for Japanese students with global ambitions. in addition to facilitating weekends with 180 participants, more numbers in there, and reporting a 90% end program satisfaction, which is a more important figure because it actually shows that not only did we have a bunch of people, they actually liked the time they spent with us. I was instrumental to the design and delivery of key module content via Zoom and Remo, management of an organization-wide Google Drive, and training of 30+ program coaches across 6 time zones. 30+ program, so this shows that I was able to lead a group of people and that we had to focus on international collaboration, which for a lot of remote companies is very important. So you can make these things sound as exciting or as dull as you want. And I encourage you to make them sound as exciting as possible, whether it's another job or your work with Come On Out. And if you're concerned that you might be dishonest, ask us and we can tell you if you're saying something that's a bit too extreme. But you should not feel afraid to speak highly of your accomplishments. Because if you can substantiate what you're saying, you should put it. Because ultimately, this is what gets people to want to meet you. So I think I've inadvertently bragged enough about my experience. So let's look at some examples that I cooked up for you guys earlier with regards to how you could pitch your internships. I've got about 3 examples here. The first one could be for marketing intern. So the example I've got here is working with a remote education startup. These are keywords that are really good if you see yourself working in a startup. So definitely include the word startup if you want to work with a small company. I grew the company's presence on TikTok and produced a series of videos that positioned the company's eTEFL certification offering to generate new business via social media. So this is the sort, if you did a role like this, this is a good way to position the type of company you work for so that other companies will know that if they are that type, they immediately think this person is familiar with our struggle, with our plight. It portrays a specific expertise in content production and in social media. And it also demonstrates that you understand the business value that you're creating for creating new business and sources of income by positioning the eTEFL certification offering. Now, this might not be relevant to you. Very likely you did not do this, but consider these points. Consider how you position Come On Out in the eyes of the reader, because that makes a difference in terms of how you are credible to different sizes of institution. And the different areas you focus on in your internship explanation will determine how people will regard your work and its relevance to them. And we've got the business development intern. So thinking very specifically of the business development team here, as part of a team expanding a successful program to foreign markets, not saying startup here. Here we're saying a successful program to foreign markets. It shows the ability to work in a scaling business, which is a different tier entirely. And Come On Out is kind of in a funny gray zone between being both a scaling organization and a startup. I performed market research, keywords, on the Korean education system and produced a financial calculator on Excel. I still love how one of the people on our team did this, to compute program expenses, saving upwards of 80% of time in drafting up business proposals. I don't know if that's how much time it'll save. I think it'll save 500% of time. That financial calculator is a godsend. But the point is here, you are in this particular job description, job experience write-up, you can demonstrate the type of company you work for, again, this time in scaling, a familiarity with foreign markets, which for an international business is very beneficial, noting market research, which is often a thing that many entry-level positions in consulting companies will deal with, Korean education system, again, ties to foreign markets, Excel, a keyword, because who doesn't want a bit of Excel, and then ending on a benefit, showing that I saved the people in this company X amount of time and or money. The implicit thing being communicated there is I can save you X amount of time and or money. So these are the sorts of things that you can imply. And it's all about understanding the market you want to work in and understanding the people that you are approaching. But as you can see, there's lots of ways that you can phrase the same experience by looking through different lenses. Then my favorite one, virtual communication specialist. I wrote this with Zane in mind. Leveraging a virtual community of hundreds of English teachers, quantifiable, I was instrumental in promoting communication between current staff, interns, and past alumni via the management of a Discord server. My mandate further extended to creating custom emoji for the server by turning our director of programs into a living meme. It was hilarious. And I'm not necessarily sure you'd want the last part, but I couldn't resist. And I think it shows an element of creativity and goodwill and contribution. And, depending on who you're applying to, you don't necessarily need a high level of formality. Generally, it's good to be formal, but throwing in some humor in there can also make people enjoy it. Just maybe not quite this. Nonetheless, the first half shows how you can discuss a very literal situation, which is I helped a bunch of people talk more easily, and you can position it from just being I created a Discord server to I united three specific people groups that weren't communicating, that were an asset to the company. Just a different way of looking at the same situation that makes it hold a lot more gravitas than it might if you just said, I hosted a Discord server and I was admin. So what could your resume entry look like? That's ultimately what I hope you'll start to begin to consider a lot more from this presentation. So let's summarize. What can you do to get recruiters' attention with your resume? First thing is to consider the three qualities. Quantify your work. Focus on the benefits of what you've done and be relevant to the keywords that they are looking for. Capture your efforts. Consider your goals, your creations, and their impacts, and incorporate them into your writing. And as you incorporate them, try as much as you can to shape them via the three qualities. And third, invest time in your resume. It's a document you're going to revisit time and time again. Don't be afraid to keep tinkering with it. And I'll leave this up to you. If anybody wants to see how my CV has evolved over time, I'm happy to show that after this presentation. It's very much a thing that it's not something that you do once and then it's complete. It's something that you tend to create in iterations, where you'll end up with one prototype that you run with for a few years, and then one day it'll grow outdated and you'll need to remake it completely differently. And then you'll run with that generation and then remake it again later. So it's always a thing just to consider that it's never going to be a thing that's going to be fully done. But what you can aim for is to make it as best as possible with what you know right now, with the market you're familiar with right now, and with what your aspirations are right now. And I'd say just having fun with it and having something that you can enjoy building and creating. Because that's definitely what has me spend time in the resume or in creating these presentations. You just have to find an element that appeals to you. So now take 5 minutes and consider, perhaps write it down on a piece of paper or in a document somewhere, even a message to yourself. Consider, what will you use what you've learned today to get recruiters' attention and improve the way in which you apply to jobs? All right, take just a few more moments just to wrap up, and we can conclude and head into the Q&A. All right, so that is your resume, how to get recruiters' attention with your come out experience, and hopefully with all of your experience. Because I definitely intended this presentation to focus much more broadly so that you have something that you can use wherever you go, whatever jobs you do, and hopefully move on to do bigger and better things moving forward. So I'm open to all questions now. And as always, please feel free to message me via email or on Discord or anywhere. Thank you very much.